It was paid for all privately. And I have continued to meet with businesses that want to come to South Carolina. Right in this very area, a company is going to be coming and putting a solar university that I met with and talked to. Sonic Automotive, a Fortune 500 company. I sat down with them just a few weeks ago because they're now interested in moving their corporate headquarters to South Carolina. Nobody from South Carolina other than myself has even met with them. I met with Kenny Aboul out of Charlotte, North Carolina, who wants to put a solar farm in South Carolina. I've already put him in touch with BIPEC and several different counties he's already visited. So I've been doing a lot of things in economic development as the #2 guy in the state when the governor hadn't been able to fill that duty.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bauer. Jackie Torek has the next question for South Carolina Attorney General Henry McMaster.
Mr. McMaster, you said you're committed to a new knowledge-based economy, citing the state's 3 research universities as catalysts for reaching that goal. What role will Francis Marion University, as well as other colleges in the PD, play in your plan?
They'll be integrally involved, and they'll know that they are integrally involved, and there's a lot of talent at this place. I see Dr. Carter sitting right there. We have all sorts of talented people in our colleges. I differ a little from some of my colleagues, is I don't want to close any of these schools down. We have 33 public supported institutions, either 2 or 4 year here in South Carolina. We ought to use them all, and we're not doing it. There's some people want to cut back. For example, in Sumter, you have a USC branch right next to a technical college. Some people see that as duplication. I see that as opportunity. I don't want to close them down. I want to fill them up, because I know that the answer is getting children through school and getting them educated. That's the only way we're going to get into this new knowledge-based economy that we have all the assets for. With the 3 major research universities, every time you see great economic prosperity around the country, every time you see a great research university involved in there somewhere, and you see a network of educational institutions that are pushing people to the top. The personal pathways to success that was the trail blazed here by Don Harriet is what we ought to follow. But we got to get those children on the first rung of that ladder in early childhood education. Be sure they're reading by the 3rd grade and move them on out either to academic college or technical college. If we do that with all the innovative businesses and industries that we have here, if we form a network where the governor is leading that charge, we can compete with the whole world.
For those of you at home, when he referenced Dr. Carter, that was Dr. Fred Carter, who's the president of Francis Marion, where we are tonight. 30 seconds now for Ms. Haley.
You know, I think the answer for Francis Marion and for so many others is to make sure that we hold all of higher education institutions accountable. If you take state funds, the way we decide your funding is based on in-state versus out-of-state students. How many dollars get inside the classroom? Whether your programs are actually helping South Carolina businesses. We don't need to fund schools of higher ed based on the number of lobbyists at the State House. It needs to be because they are efficient and effective for the students and the families that pay for those students to go there, that it's actually working so that the schools can be effective in terms of helping with our South Carolina businesses, and that we make sure that the money going into the classroom is right. I think it's all about accountability, not just with Francis Marion, but with every institution of higher ed.
Mr. Bauer.
I've actually been to Francis Marion several times in the last year. Actually, I talked to Dr. Carter when it looked like at one time I may have to take over for the governor for his leadership. I called him and asked his advice. Francis Marion is providing a vehicle that so many people in this community need. Quite frankly, they can't take all the students that would like to come to this university, and that is what the role of so many of these universities throughout the state are, is to educate our young people and provide them new opportunities that they wouldn't have without it. And so I actually, when I was on the MAP Commission, voted to keep all the colleges and universities in South Carolina open because we have that demand, and some people can't make it to the flagship universities in other areas of the state anyway. So what he's providing here is a wonderful vehicle.
Mr. Barrett.
There shouldn't be a quarter that goes by where the governor's not sitting down with the heads of his research institutions, with all of his university and colleges across the state, to talk about how we can work together, how we can better serve South Carolina, how we can co-op our 2-year institutions, our technical schools, a lot of people call them. I call them community colleges. We need to work together and figure out how we can collaborate. Not only with that, but we've got K through 12 schools that are working with our 2-year institution, figuring out collectively how to spend the taxpayer dollars wisely and move education forward in South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Our next question will be directed from Rusty Ray of News 13 to Representative Nikki Haley.
Mrs. Haley, you've won the support of the Tea Party and one of its favorites just recently, former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. But what could you do right away as governor of this state to work within the existing power structure in Columbia, in Washington, and others to make sure South Carolina gets what it needs to continue its growth in a global marketplace?
You know, I've fought for the last 6 years for people to know the power of their voice. And I've also fought for elected officials to remember who it is that they work for. The key is I will do a couple of things. One, I will have an agenda every year. I will take that agenda to the General Assembly and I'll say pick 3 major items. Whatever 3 items they pick, I will go and tell all of the public about it because I want them to know about legislation before it passes and not after. And then I will work with them from the committee level to the House level to the Senate level, so by the time it gets to my desk, it will have been a team effort. For all of those legislators that push for good government pro-business reforms, I'll go into every one of their districts and praise them for it. For all of those legislators that go against good government pro-business reforms, I'm going to go into all of their districts and hold their hand to the fire because the people deserve to know that too. But let me just tell you how I work. When we were dealing with on-the-record voting, the bill came up and one of the legislators in committee came up and said, we just want you to know we're going to kill your bill today. And I said, okay, I just want you to know what your options are. If you kill this bill today, I'm going to go out and say it's very clear the Republican leadership doesn't understand what it means to be accountable to the people they represent. If you pass this bill today, I'm going to go out and say it's very clear the Republican leadership understands the importance of being accountable to the people they represent. The person that was going to kill it moved for its passage. When you give them the option to do the right thing, when you let them know circumstances before they happen, the legislature 70% of the time will make the right decision. 30% of the time we might fight a little bit. But at the end of the day, we are going to get things done. Our days of debating are over. Now it is time for action.
Mr. Bauer, 30 seconds.
Well, first off, I'd say that I don't think she has all the Tea Party. I mean, Mike Huckabee and a lot of the Tea Party folks are supporting me. But secondly, I would say the most successful governor in the history of the state of South Carolina was a guy named Carroll Campbell. And he had one of the same things or experiences I did, and that's serving in the House and Senate. If you want to see somebody effectively get things through the General Assembly, it would be somebody that has served in both chambers. Those chambers are vastly different. And if you look at an office that historically had no powers, that was the Lieutenant Governor's office. It now has a $40 million agency that has given money back every year to the Budget and Control Board, including part of my pay, and we got it done through working with the legislature.
Mr. Barrett?
You know, Andre's right about one thing. I think in my lifetime, I'm almost 50 years old, there's never been a better governor than Governor Carroll Campbell in a legislative state. And I think about what he did, the real change he instituted. You don't have to lose your conservative principles to be a good leader. It's working together. That's what we did with our Putting South Carolina Back to Work plan. We had legislators and economic developers and professors across this state to formulate a plan so when it goes forward, it is our plan, not my plan. And that's how you have to govern, and that's how you change ideas.
And I'm only right about one thing.
Mr. McMaster.
Well, I think Governor Campbell did a superior job, and so did David Beasley, who is a son of the PD, by the way. And they did things the same way. They were strong leaders, and they kept most of the debate behind the scenes. That is, most of the fighting, most of the arm twisting, all of those kind of things were behind the scenes. I think they recognized that an effective leader has to be one who can get things done. You have to stick to your conservative principles. But I'm afraid that the Sanford years have taught us, and I'm not blaming anybody, but the Sanford years have taught us that you got to work with people in order to get things done. And I'm the one in the executive branch who has worked with people to get things done for 8 years. I'd like to continue that as your governor.
All right, thank you, Mr. McMaster. We have another question now from our Voice of the Voter project, and each candidate has 1 minute to answer this question. Our Voice of the Voter question comes from Richard Gregory from Myrtle Beach, and he wants to know, how much funding will you give to the Interstate 73 project to help the economies of northeastern South Carolina diversify and get better? And Richard Gregory from Myrtle Beach, we thank you for that question. And Lieutenant Governor Bauer, you get the first crack at it.
Well, I would say this. We need to look at where we're getting funding from. We should close our rest areas, lease them out, let the private sector run rest areas, let them run the visitor center, find new ways to create revenue without asking the taxpayers for more money. We can come up with creative ways to come up with new revenue. And I would say this, the PD and Myrtle Beach, or Ulrey, subsidize so much of the state. We take so much money from them and don't send any of it back, or very little. We've got to do more to send more of that back to one of the crown jewels of South Carolina, one of the areas that brings so much revenue in if we want to continue to see that revenue come in through tourism. So that money's got to come back. But I would look at all kinds of things where we waste money. We pay an architect every time we build a new elementary school. Do y'all realize that? Or any school. Why not build template drawings, much like a Walmart or a Waffle House or a Burger King, and over and over and over use that drawing? You'd save over $500,000 for every school building. Then your building costs